Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. May I have your attention, please? All quiet, please. Thank you. Actually, it's not morning as I'm recording this. It's in the evening. That's kind of how things go these days. You guys watch it in the morning, or maybe you watch it later on. Either way, you watch it. I know you guys are getting ready for your IAs, and I've had lots of conversations with folks. I've even got some coming up here with folks on their IAs. So hopefully that's all working out very well. And we're going to continue with our lesson today, which this is, of course, the notes leading up to you guys watching episode number 4. We look at one of many big time crises, conflicts that are going on in the Cold War. And this one is one of 2 big ones dealing with Berlin. Okay, this is the Berlin crisis of 1948, 1949. Let's get right to it. Okay, this is, what is it? Page 3 in your notes. Episode number 4, it's got some key names there. Obviously, those are going to be very important, and we'll just make sure that you get the whole story here. So here's the big picture. Actually, this interesting thing, we got an airplane from the United States Air Force flying over Berlin. This is in 1948, could be 1949, I'm not exactly sure which year. If it had been 3 years earlier, yeah, it'd be dropping bombs. United States military, British, Soviets attacking Germany just a few years earlier, getting it to defeat, surrender. You know, it was run by Hitler. Hitler's gone. And now, what is going to be the future of Germany? What is going to be the situation in Germany? Well, these people right here are all cheering on this airplane because this is one of the airplanes that are going to fly. Many airplanes flying during this crisis, bringing in supplies. Yeah, let's get right to the story of what takes place in 1948, 1949, when the Soviet Union and its other allied partners from World War II, the United States, Britain, and France, actually are not getting along so well when it comes to what to do about Germany from here on out. Okay, let's just remind ourselves, right? So we've got Germany's divided up into 4 regions, okay, 4 zones of occupation. And then you've got Berlin itself, which is contained within the Soviet zone of occupation. Berlin itself is divided up into 4 different zones of occupation. And it's a very interesting thing here. You've got like the French sector. Look, there's an airport there. I wonder if that's going to make any difference in the story that you're going to hear today. Oh, look, there's an airport in the British sector as well. Oh, look, there's Tempelhof Airport in the American sector. Interesting. And then you've got the East Berlin, which is the Soviet sector. And yeah. So an interesting thing is going on as you go into, but accessible only through canal, rail, and I mean, you can't grow a whole bunch of stuff like in West Berlin. It doesn't produce all its own food and energy and all the kinds of things it needs. No. As part of the agreement between, among the 4, the British, the French, the Americans, and the Soviets, there are canal, rail, and road and air routes to connect the British, American, and French sectors of Germany, which will become ultimately West Germany, going to right here, Berlin. So that's part of the agreement, right? It's part of the agreement. What's going to happen as we move forward? What is going to be the case? Make sure you have this down. The Soviets are really not keen on having Germany reunited. And they're really not interested in the western parts of Germany under the British, French, and American controls to be united into anything. Soviets would just assume this 2-time threat, Germany, remain not a threat, divided up. However, that's not what the British and the French and the Americans are thinking. They're interested in Germany becoming a state again. And if the Soviets aren't going to cooperate in some kind of a real, true democratic fashion, well, fine. The Americans and British and the French will work with the Germans living in West Germany and create a West German state. Oh, and that will also include all these people living here in West Berlin because they are living in territories that the British, French, and Americans control as well. And so obviously we got some disagreement among the big four as to how things are going to proceed. You know, one of the key issues is when the Americans and the British and the French introduce into their regions a new currency, right? A brand new currency. Because there was a lot of black market going on. It's like, here, I'll have a tire for a bag of donuts or something. It's like, no, you really need a currency. So which currency is that going to be? Well, you know, the British, French, and Americans got tired of waiting and so forth, and like, where they're going to introduce a currency. Boom. Oh, by the way, sorry, please let me introduce the American general in charge of the American sector in West Germany, and particularly also West Berlin, General Lucius Clay. There you see him. He's going to be a very, very important person here. Sorry, I digress. Oh, and by the way, he's not smoking cigarettes. You'll see in the video he smokes lots of cigarettes. He's got a lot of, there's going to be some pretty intense things going on here, and he's a great commander for the American forces there. Oh, there we go. That's what I wanted to talk about. The new currency. One German mark. The mark is like a dollar, you know, it's the name of the currency that is introduced in the Western German sectors, including West Berlin. And it has real value. I mean, that's one of the things that you see in West Germany up until the time of the introduction of the euro, which is what the currency they use for the European Union. West Germans really did have a pretty solid currency. And this currency introduced really upsets the Soviets, because this is a pretty decent currency and it's going to start to be widely used not only in West Berlin and West Germany, but also over in East Germany and East Berlin. They're going to like, this thing's got real value. The Soviets and East Germany, the Eastern German areas, are also going to introduce their own currency, but it's just not worth as much and it doesn't get as widely used. And we're going to see some continuing themes here as far as like the economic validity and strength. There is going to be differences between West and East, and some of those differences are going to expand over time. Well, the Soviets look here and they're like, whatever, we've got Berlin completely surrounded by us, and we don't like what the Americans, British, and French are doing. You know, we're just gonna take it. Now, were they gonna like militarily take it over? No, they're not going to militarily take it over, but they're going to put some pressure, and there's going to be a crisis. So here is what happens. Beginning in 1948, the Soviets decide that they are going to blockade West Berlin. Those land corridors, those, you know, the rail and the road, and then the canals, Soviets are like, nope, not gonna let you guys bring any more supplies in. We're tired of dealing with it. It's almost like a big game of chicken, because the Soviets are like, what, do you want to challenge us? You want to like send an armed convoy in? General Lucius Clay actually was like, yeah, actually, this is my recommendation to President Truman. We should send an armed convoy in here. We have rights by our agreement to get those things in there. And if we need to use force, we're going to do that. Truman wasn't so keen on doing that. He's like, I don't want to have like a fight between US forces and the Soviets. But does that mean that there's going to be an abandonment if the United States isn't going to militarily fight with the Soviets in order to get resupply into West Berlin by land or canal? Does that mean we're going to give up on them? Absolutely not, right? Absolutely not. So instead of an armed convoy, General Clay now is in charge of an airlift. Are we going to dare the Soviets to like shoot down the planes that we fly into West Berlin? And we're going to be flying planes, lots of planes, because they can't grow the food they need. They can't produce all the energy that they need. And when it gets into the winter months, and back in those days, they're burning a lot of coal. Where's that coal going to come from? Yeah, this is high stakes, very, very high stakes. The Soviets cut off electricity too. Did I mention that? They cut off electricity. If there's going to be any electricity produced in West Berlin, it's going to have to come from whatever we can get into West Berlin. And that's not going to be an easy thing to do. In the early stages, keep an eye on these numbers. In the early stages, we were able to fly in about 2,000 tons of supplies every day, food, coal, all kinds of essential supplies in. Plane load after plane load after plane load. Is 2,000 enough? 2,000 tons, is that enough? No, it's not enough. I mean, that's what the Soviets figure. They're like, oh, well, you know, the Americans and the British and the French are just going to give up on it. And, you know, they're not going to dare try and bring in the armed convoy and so forth. Because it gets expensive. It's not easy to just shove things into airplanes and take them up real high, especially when you're talking like a big, huge cargo load full of coal. And you'll hear in the video, I mean, it's like when you have cargo full of coal, you have to actually leave the door open in the back, because otherwise the coal dust is going to like clog up all the engines and all kinds of stuff. So you have to have that blowing out. So, I mean, this is like a logistical difficult thing, but here's the deal. And this is the message that the West Berliners and the West Germans are getting from the United States, from the British, from the French. We are not going to abandon you. We want you as part of our team. Yeah, Germany was the big villain during World War II. But you guys, we want you to be part of our democracy club, our capitalist thing, and we got your back. We're going to get through this. The operation is called Operation Vittles. That's what the Americans call it. I think the British had another name for it. It's like Vittles are like food. Like, here's your lunch. So we had B-29 bombers. All right, re-equipped now. Instead of dropping bombs, we're loading them up one after another after another. I mean, at times you're going to have some of these pilots bringing in the plane in 3 times a day. I mean, they take off from their runway in an airfield in West Germany. In the western part of Germany, it's not officially West Germany yet, but in the western part of Germany, the American, British, and French occupied areas, and fly it into West Berlin and the one of the airports there, unload it, turn around, fly back, load up again. This is going on and on and on, right? After a while, we started to get about 4,500 tons a day. That's not bad. 4,500 tons a day. Is that going to be enough? All right, winter's coming and we're going to need more and more and more. We hire civilian companies, right? You can put that down. We hire civilian companies also to provide planes to provide that service. Sometimes it's not so good. Sometimes the weather doesn't cooperate. It's like, whoa, we're going to let these people starve. Actually, there were lives that were lost. Some of the planes crashed due to bad weather, equipment failures, and so forth. So there were some people who lost their lives. But the Soviets did not shoot any down. The Soviets weren't going to do that. I mean, they didn't want to be the cause of a hot war between the United States and France and the Soviets. Okay, so this is just pushing, going on week after week after week after week. I mean, you know, electricity is not is like available for maybe 4 hours a day in parts of West Berlin. This is tough. This is tough. I mean, talk about feeling isolated. Eventually, Stalin will be open to having some talks with the British, French, and Americans. He's still very keen on not having West Germany created as a separate country, implementing various different methods to, you know, scare and intimidate the Americans and so forth, buzzing their planes, flying in real close. I mean, you know, flying real close to the American planes as they're coming in, but not shooting. Okay, just kind of this intimidation effect. Meanwhile, of course, this is an interesting thing. Meanwhile, the city of Berlin, and this is, some of you guys are thinking, well, wasn't there a wall between you know, East Berlin and West Berlin and so forth? Not yet. That's coming later. That's in another crisis. That wall between West Berlin and East Berlin, built by the Soviets and their East German partners, that's going to start in August 13th of 1961. But at this point, you have movement across East and West Berlin. In fact, there's like one city council, one mayor of West Berlin. And so West Berliners could go to East Berlin and you know, they're harassed and given a hard time and so forth. The Soviets have organized various different groups, communist groups, to come into the West Berlin city council to disrupt it, so forth. The city council was actually meeting in the East Berlin part of the city at the time. And, you got these propaganda posters and so forth. They're like, I mean, this is an all-out effort to put pressure to, get the Americans, British, and French to leave. And yeah, but what's their response? I mean, what do West Berliners want? What do some of the East Berliners want? What they wanted was not for the Americans, the British, and French to leave. They wanted them to stay. And they had big, huge, massive rallies. There was over 300,000 that gathered at a particular rally to support democracy, to support the continued partnership with the British, French, and Americans, to support the introduction of the Deutschmark and capitalism and so forth. And in fact, they decided, we're going to start having our city council meetings over here in the western part of Berlin, where we can get some more security and we don't get harassed by a bunch of gangs put up by the communists in the Soviet Union. And of course, they're very happy that the United States is organizing what is called RIAS, R-I-A-S. It's basically radio that is put out by the United States. You can say it's propaganda. It's got good music, but it's also got a, more reliable source of news and information about what's going on, as opposed to what you would get maybe, from the Soviets run news agencies and so forth over in Eastern Berlin. In the election of December 1948 for city council and for mayor, the leader, pro-democracy, pro-capitalism, pro-West, there you go, Ernst Reuter. He is going to be the elected mayor of Berlin, and ultimately you're going to see a split in the division of how to run the city. The western portions, basically you have a West Berlin mayor. The western portions will be operating in one way, and then of course the Soviets are going to dominate how things are going to operate in the eastern part. And so this is going on day after day after day. And the Americans and the British and the French are getting better and better and better at getting the supplies in. Check this out. In the month of April 1949, many, many months into this Berlin airlift and blockade that was going on, 13,000 tons of supplies coming in. 13,000 tons. There were enough supplies coming in. I mean, it could go on and on and on and on. Did it have to? No, I mean, it got to the point, literally, where if the United States, got this pilot right here, check this out, beloved by the West German kids, because he would drop chocolate bars. He'd bring the plane in and open it up, a part where a bunch of kids would be like hanging out, and they have these little parachutes come down with chocolate bars. And it means like, the Soviets looking and going, if they've got extra room on those planes for bringing in chocolate and so forth, we can see where this is going. So the candy bomber, yeah, the United States, very popular bombing with candy toward the end of the Berlin airlift. That was, we reached our peak in April 1949. And by May 12th, 1949, the crisis is over. Stalin blinks. The blockade is over. The United States, British, and French can move their supplies in to the people of West Berlin by land, by water. They don't have to keep loading up the airplanes and so forth. Yay, what a big, huge sigh of relief. There's not going to be a big, huge, massive war breaking out in Berlin. Is the Cold War over? Well, the crisis is averted. The Cold War is not over. No. There's some lessons learned. And in fact, if you roll it back 1 month, here's one lesson that the Western European countries and West German people realized is we need a military alliance. There you go. April, that's typo, I didn't type that. April 4th, 1949, sorry. That was when NATO, North Atlantic Treaty Organization, military alliance, basically one for all and all for one. One of us gets attacked, there is a commitment on the part of each country to come to the defense of the others. So that's a military commitment. We're going to be like solid in the face of intimidation from Stalin. So is there going to be any more problems, right? Or is the problem solved, right? I mean, Stalin blinks. The United States and our NATO allies form up, right? And then it's all over, right? August, yeah. Wait a minute. What's going on in this picture? Is that a nuclear weapon that is being dropped by the United States on the Soviet Union? Because this is in the Soviet Union. Is that like an A bomb, an atomic bomb dropped by the United States, showing to the Soviets that, yeah, you better not mess with us and so forth? No, you know what that is? The Soviets have developed nuclear weapons. That's a picture of their test of the atomic weapon. They've joined the nuclear club. What, it just took 4 years? Soviets made it a top priority in science and espionage, and they did it. And so if there was a potential threat of the United States using nuclear weapons against the Soviets to stop them from doing whatever, Soviets got nuclear weapons now too. That's where we are in this story. Yeah. So Berlin, a problem, a lot of lessons. We'll be back looking at the situation in Berlin later on. Very important key event in the early stages of the Cold War. And the Cold War continues. Watch the video, take careful notes as we go through on that one, and good luck with your IAs. We'll see you.